Sometimes we follow breathwork courses, we do somatic or whatever, all these beautiful practices and tools and things. And then I see them in the supermarket and a lady drops the bag and they simply just pass and they go to the counter and they forget about the woman. And then I'm like, you're missing the exact point of why we're actually doing this work. So because you know how to do mindful practices doesn't make you mindful. We think it's a lot about doing and taking things sometimes very serious. Well, I believe it's in your mundane life and it's your daily thing where you show what you're really about. Nobody ever said in life that it's supposed to be a tough journey. Life is supposed to be fun and life is supposed to be alive. And I think that's where the core message is for me. Spirituality is not stepping out of this human experience, it's the contrary. It's here. It's the mundane life that we live where the spirituality is.
Welcome to the Spirit Unfolding podcast, where we explore the depth of the human experience, the creative energy that runs through us all, and what we can do to create a more beautiful world. My name is Lars, and every episode I sit down with a creative, pioneer or teacher in the fields of spirituality, art, health, and the natural world. We want to give you actionable insights to spiritual growth, taking ownership of your life and expanding your perspective on life's possibilities. Also, you can live a more authentic, loving, and fulfilling life. I am honored that you chose to spend your valuable time listening to the Spirit Unfolding podcast. And you would really help us by subscribing to YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcast, and sharing the episode with your family and friends and on social media. Thank you so much. Welcome back to a new episode. My guest today is Oscar Alonso Delgado, who is the founder of Amsterdam-based The Gathering of Men, which is a lifestyle community for men. He also takes people to go into nature with another one of his companies called A Never Ending Journey, going to Nepal, going to different places throughout Europe. And he's just done a full year bushcrafting course and surviving in nature for 2 weeks, going back to the Stone Age. So we really had a lot of fun in this conversation. He's really one of my dear brothers that I hold close to my heart and that also inspires me so much in the way he carries himself and inspires other men to step into their power and their authenticity. So we had a lot of fun in this one, and I hope you will enjoy it. Thank you. Yeah, welcome, Oscar, man. Very happy to have you here. And very glad that we could find the time to sit down and obviously working together for the Gathering of Men for a long time. You're a big inspiration. And we're definitely going to talk about the men's work. But first, I would like to dive into something that I know you've done, but I haven't really actually talked to you about a lot. So, which is the year-long survival course, and especially being in nature for 2 weeks, just with everything that you created. Like back to the Stone Age, pretty much, I guess, right? So
We did.
What was that like?
Yeah. I think one of the important lessons, lots, is for me that I came up with. What I really realized is, I always say, in everything we do, we become. Nature will always be part of our nature, and this is what I tried to live. As in, there's so much nature running through us, in the sense of the changing of seasons, in the flowing of rivers. That sometimes we go fast and sometimes we go slow, and sometimes we reach these heights in life and we go low. And for me, one of the reasons what I notice, and I think many more people from what I experienced around me, is that many of us somehow feel the connection to nature and we're like, oh yeah, nature's good. I love being in nature. And so we go to nature, we go there, but as soon as we see the sun setting, we run out. We run out because it becomes dark. We don't know what to do there anymore. And for me, this was one of the important things that I started to realize, is that I may experience the connection to nature, but I also came to the conclusion that I actually missed the skills and the knowledge to really thrive in nature. So nature became like a place to visit, but not necessarily for me a place where I could live, because I didn't know how to live with the land. And this was one of the reasons that I really felt like, okay, I want to I want to explore. I want to dive in deeper. I want to genuinely feel what it means. Besides just feeling connected, can I stay there? Can I be with nature? Can I live in nature? And from this part, I decided to take a year course, which actually deepened my practice in terms of skills. And there was a funny realization that I read a book. It's called Grandfather. For me, it's one of the best. It was gifted by a friend. Actually, Tom gave it to me. He said, like, "Oh, is this book for you?" So I started reading it. It was a beautiful story about grandfather at First Nations, a Native American who. It was written by another guy, Tom Brown Jr., and he kind of explained the life of grandfather with life lessons with it. And that's when I started to realize that these natives, they had something that we didn't have and that I didn't have. Like we shared the same connection to nature, but I lacked the skills and knowledge. And sometimes I see people from the bushcraft world who have the skills and knowledge, but they lack the connection to nature. And that's what I started to realize that, yeah, this is what I want to learn. You know, I really want to be there. I want to experience what it means and learn how to make a fire. Like we're so used to putting in here. You just prepared us a beautiful cacao. We had one, you press on a button, you ping, 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 ping. And, you know, the ignition takes place and suddenly there's fire and there's how's the thing called? It even extracts the smoke and and it's there. And the whole process of understanding what fire actually meant back in the days and to be able to carry all those elements, all those essence from back then, what it took for us to now live the life that we're currently living is a sense of gratitude that is beyond someone can ever understand unless you have been there. And that's what brought me in goosebumps.
Yeah, man. So it didn't just bring you back to nature, but it kind of brought you back to all those generations of thousands of years before us.
Big time. Big time. And with that understanding coming back into a world that goes so fast, that is so lost sometimes in the jungle, in the concrete jungle, because we didn't know how to flow in the rhythms of nature anymore, and we don't even care. You know, I mean, now everything has become like a given. It's just there, unless you get to a point when it gets cold and you need fire, or you need transport, or you need to get somewhere, or you don't go to the supermarket to buy a fish or to a local farmer's shop or whatever. But if you know how much it took actually to get it to the place where we are now, the sense of gratitude to life, and also to in a funny way, the evolution of life until where it is now is very interesting and something that I really take with me. And with that, I also notice that we're losing again this touch of nature back in our society. And I believe in some way, we need to find our way back to nature and understand that we're responsible for it and it's part of us. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's not only a practical and let's say a more physical thing, but it's especially this coming back to our true nature.
Yeah.
And finding the more like the emotional and spiritual connection with the earth,
yeah,
and with everything around us.
Yeah.
Was there any particular moment that stood out for you that, you know, in let's say this whole course,
Yeah.
where you really, that really made you see things differently?
Yeah. I feel like there's two things I want to say, but I'll start with one. And this was particularly still during the year course when I was following it. And I remember this one day where we had to make our travel basket from zero. And it was springtime. And normally during springtime, the plants come to life. So the cycle starts again, let's say. And a lot of the fluids and the liquids, the nutrients, they run through the trees again and through the branches, and which means the wood is also more flexible. So this is normally a season where you can cut wood or small branches and bend them naturally, without necessarily having to steam them or anything, because we had to make a travel basket. So we work with willow particularly, and we had to. For me, it always hurts because we had to work with living trees. and we needed the branches to use those. And I notice I'm very mindful of choosing which branch I take, and if it's something that is really useful to me. And this is another lesson in life. Are we just grabbing anything that we can grab, or are we just taking just what's needed? And this was one of the things that when I started walking through the forest, and I started to pick very carefully, the branches that I would need, the twigs, and I would look at it and I would really say like, hey, thank you for me using you in order to make a travel basket. You can now withdraw your energy from this branch as much as you can. And so I would take it off, and I would and normally we would just need, like, let's say 1 meter of the branch, and the rest, because of its thickness, we wouldn't really need. But here comes the thing: we were all learned during the year course that willow is an extremely tough tree. Willow, if you leave even a branch, you put it back in the ground, it can grow out again and it becomes another fucking tree.
Yeah.
It's mad. So I was like, okay, so every piece that I cut, I just put it back in the earth. And I said, may you grow. And I came back with my trees, with my branches, and I saw on the way back, it felt like I walked through a deforestation that took place. And I was like, what the fuck is going on, guys? So I started putting back all the branches that all the people, the participants from the group, I'm not sure if it was all, but many just left there, not even putting it in. And I noticed coming back actually with a sense of a broken heart, that I was like, guys, what are we doing? We're here. We pretend to really like and love nature, and look at what we're doing to it. And then luckily a good brother of mine, who's the teacher also of the year course time, he said like, hey guys, be mindful of the trees. Know that you're working with living trees. So be mindful when you're bending. And I said like, wow, thank you. And then I said, my heart was broken. I said to the group when I came back, I said, you all know that willow can be replanted. And somehow you forgot to take responsibility for what you took out of nature. And suddenly you saw everyone like, oh shit, it all hit home.
Yeah.
So they understood. And it felt like in a way, it was my responsibility, because I had the connection to nature and they had it in a different way, or not yet, but they had the skills and knowledge, that that's where we go. So I came in to bring connection also. And this is a particular story that was for me very typical in life. If I look at it as in what I said before, we just take because it's there, because we didn't have to work for it. But if we would know that nature is actually the one who's sustaining us, who's making life possible for us, then we would really change the narrative of what it is that we actually need, Yeah. And that's what I started to realize, like, okay, what is it that I actually just need? And does it need to be a living tree or not? So I came back out of the forest, and at that moment, I gave the message, and I understood why I'm also here, partly. And I feel that my journey into nature and learning the skills again, and now inviting people into experiences like this, is also my way of bridging this connection to nature again, which we're losing. But we all know it's important to us. But sometimes it becomes difficult when we don't really spend the amount of time in it that is actually sometimes necessary for us to spend in it. And which brings me to the second lesson, which is a very important one. It's funny, right? Where do you go when you, for what reasons do you go to nature?
Clear my head,
Okay.
ground, connect, really properly relax deeper, on a deeper level. But also in a way to play. Like last year I really challenged myself to just like be more like a kid again in nature. Like, let's try to balance on a tree that's fallen over. Like let's go where, I would normally wouldn't go. Like, yeah. So it's also bringing up more of a sort of a youth, a aliveness, a playfulness. But it's always to, when, let's say, the concrete jungle becomes too overwhelming, or a full day with a lot of appointments, and I notice I'm too much in my head. Yeah, one of the things I would do is go into nature. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you have it. I think it's one of the things. The concrete jungle makes us feel a certain way, and that's why we seek nature. So I think the interesting message, which I believe it's always about us, what we experience, what lives inside of us, and therefore we go to these places, to nature, to simply be there. And the funny thing is, like, interesting, some people go to nature to clear their head, some people go to nature to cry, some people go to nature to connect, some people go to nature to sit in silence, some people go to nature to release their anger or frustration that lives inside of them, and some people go to nature to relax and to do nothing. And what is nature actually doing?
Yeah, it's just being, holding you maybe.
Yeah, but why? That's a funny story, because nature is just doesn't fucking care why you're there. Nature is just being nature.
Yeah.
And for me, because of that, nature is simply just allowing yourself to be. If you want to cry, cry. The river will still flow. If you want to sit in silence, you go. The birds will still whistle, and sing. If you want to make a noise, you do that. The plants will still continue growing. So everyone's like, okay, cool. I continue being a bird. I continue being a tree.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So that's the funny thing. Actually, what is nature doing for us? It's allowing ourselves to be in a safe place without any judgment.
Yeah.
As nature is completely indifferent. Who is in front of you? It doesn't care in some way. It's just simply there, and it will continue its flow that it has. And I believe that that's where the power lies for nature, is that it allows us to be ourselves with full permission, no judgment, and full safety in all variations that we come with and the ways we show up. And so it's like, wow. And that's why I believe, like, yeah, I miss nature. I mean, when we say I want to spend more time in nature, it's in a way, I believe we're also saying I want to spend time in a place that makes me feel grounded, connected to myself, and fully be okay with whatever lives inside, and having it a place for it to be.
Yeah, a place of non-judgment, in a sense.
Nature doesn't care about that.
Yeah,
It's just there.
yeah.
I mean, the fox will still continue his path, like, it's just there.
Yeah.
And that's it. And we're like, okay. Oh, okay. And suddenly the lightness comes in. You're like, oh, okay. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true. Oh, I definitely went there to like cry or whatever as well. Or like when I'm just feeling heavy and just sitting down, like finding a nice place where you can like really, it's almost like a hand holding you, and you just relax and just be, and you just like definitely don't bring a phone, just be there, feel the fresh air. The longest I've ever been in nature, like without contact with the outside world, was about 5 days. You've done 2 weeks. What did it feel like?
I mean, I think one of the interesting things is I think I've gained a certain sense of judgment left my system. I really left it there when it came down to evolution. I would be sometimes sitting in a car with seed warming, and I would be like, what the fuck are we doing here? I was like, do we really need this? All these tweaks and things. Yeah, I can now check my heart rate and whatever. And so all these things, I had a certain sense of judgment on that. And to give you an idea, and the audience an idea, we went into nature for 12 days in Sweden at the end of September, more or less, mid-September, in reliving the Stone Age. What does that mean? Well, you've been in nature, but probably you had a fire steel, and you did 3 times like this, and you had fire.
Rain jacket and everything.
Rain jacket, a nice knife, like this. You do like this, and it cuts nicely. And you have a saw, and you finish a branch in a few minutes. We came in with everything made by ourselves, completely primitive. So we started felting our own wool outfits. We started tanning our own hides. So we literally had hides of deer, red deer, for instance, and we really had to scrape them. We had to prepare them. We had to make buckskin of it. which is a certain technique. It's called fat tanning that they used the natives, the First Nation used to wear it in especially dry places. We made our own leather and all these. We made our own cords from nettle actually. So we started twining ropes and everything from it, and we would just hit nature. And we would. The funny thing is, it reminds me, we would sit at the scouting place, where we would prepare all the stuff in the east of the country. And sometimes during the weekends, we had people doing LARP,
Oh yeah.
LARP live
Larping,
action
yeah.
role play. So people dress up as a knight, as an elf, as whatever, and they would play a whole scene there, and they would be like running after the queen, and there were castles and whatever, and a butcher, and we would just be scraping our hides there. And I was looking at them, I was like, what the fuck, man? But funny in a way, but also, and then the moment I stepped into that forest with my full outfit, completely primitive, I was like, what the fuck, man? I'm doing exactly the same thing. But I was like, eh. So I
Yeah.
came in a full outfit, but it was so beautiful, brother, because all we had was the tribe. All we had was the things that we made, and we literally had nothing else. So we would hit nature, we would choose a spot where we would set out camp, but we would stay for 12, 11 days. So we had people scouting the area. We would come back in pairs, like, hey, I have a place. I think it's a 7 out of 10, 8. Okay, so we would stick to the high numbers. We would sit there together. We would sit in silence first. We would just sit on the place, close our eyes, and just feel like, okay, how does this place feel? Is this a place where we want to settle and build this strong connection that we had as a group? And after a while, we would come back and we would look at each other and we would say, like, we found a place, and we said, like, yeah, I think this is it. And then, yeah, in a way it started. And then there's a funny thing, because you're super limited on food, and you have to preserve your energy, which
So you did bring food?
we
Or
had. Yeah, we had
yeah.
little food, as in we had a dose of protein per day, fat and sugars. um, the protein we had, to give you an idea, we had 200 grams over 12 days.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
to give you an indication, it was the bare minimum. um, and the same counts for the rest, more or less. We even had 150 of sugars, I think, and 150, I think, of fat. So 10 grams a day, more or less. So you had to slow down to the rhythms of nature and your own system, because you no longer depended on a supermarket where you could walk in like, okay, like a gas station, pong, we pumping more and we go, pim. You don't care. And this is obviously what we do in daily life as well. We pass our natural flow, our natural rhythm that our body is actually already telling us. So we would then also decide, like, okay, how are we gonna move? And it was finding our way. So we started building shelter, but the first night we slept outside. It was dry, luckily, because we had nothing to cover us with. And it was really, really, really cold. And then the next day, we started building the shelter. So, to give you an idea, a shelter, normally, if you do, let's say, the bushcraft modern items, you would have like a tarp, anything. And we would build the shelter from branches. But we had no saw. We could not cut anything.
Oh yeah.
So what
No
we
knife, no saw.
no no
Just like you
we
would
had
try to
flint.
make something from with a rock, or then?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we had flint stones, which is a stone particularly found at the sea. I know there's a lot found in Denmark, which you can hit, and sometimes like small shatters come off, let's say, and you can use them to cut. They say it can become 300 times sharper than steel.
Wow.
Um, and we would actually only look for standing trees that would have the size, let's say, of your palm, more or less, so this size. And we would only look for standing trees that were already dead, and therefore, because it's a very swampy area, rotten, so we could push them over. We would bring them into camp, and we couldn't break them. or cut them. So we had to find actually two branches that had like a Y shape. So we can use the leverage in between to break them at the right size.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when we would start to use them. So what happened? The second night we slept outside, and it was so cold because we were not protected from the wind, not from any elements. So the second night we had a first construction, so we covered the sides. Therefore, we were covered a little bit from the wind, but the cold drops. So the cold would just come in, and because we already made a fire on the first day, the fire had to attract new oxygen. So it would pull in cold air to make fire again. So we were still not fully protected, and we were laying on the sand. So there became the thinking of evolution that I now fully understand, because the first element was we're not protected from any elements. Let's build a shelter. The shelter wasn't finished, and we were laying on the sand. And laying in the sand, we thought like, this is a hard place to lay in. Let's bring in moss so we can build a bed that's made from moss. There's still air coming in through the door. Let's create a door that actually we can open and close. So bit by bit, we started adding small pieces of evolution that made our life a little bit more comfortable in harsh circumstances. And that's when I started to feel sympathy and empathy actually for evolution, that I suddenly understood like, okay, now I understand where it all started. And is everything that we have now, is it really necessary still?
Yeah, it humbles you in a way, or it makes you realize how much you actually don't need. Like what I had after these 5 days, and it wasn't, we weren't even building our own shelter, but it's still like everything you need for 5 days was in our backpack, including you can, if it's terrible weather, you'll still be fine. You have enough stuff with you, you have food with you, but like there's no electrical anything. There's no 15 different outfits you might normally have. There's not like 6 places to sit in. There's just like this, you just sit on the ground. And it actually, for me, what it did was like, it really brought me back to not just reconnecting, but appreciating way more the connection also between people, because all of a sudden there's no distraction, right? You're just with your brothers. Or was this only men, by the way, or was it also women?
Mixed. Yeah,
Mixed.
I think we're 50-50, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, cool, man.
And I think what I've really learned to experience is sometimes we have this perception of when we go to nature with an idea of how it will be and how it would look like, and it turns out so differently every single time, I think. Which I think nature is an invitation back to yourself. So sometimes it's funny because when we're at home, for instance, we're like, oh yeah, I want to bring in nature. We start looking on YouTube, look for this video and you put on forest sounds, and then suddenly you hear birds in the background or whatever. So in a way, we also came into Sweden with that idea, of like, oh yeah, and we would wake up with the morning hearing birds, and it's so good. And I think 80% of the time in Sweden, complete silence.
Oh.
Zero. And I think this is something that I genuinely think that we also try to recreate. Here it comes. We're still looking for a version of nature that makes us actually feel in a certain way. So in a way, we're not accepting nature for the way that it comes and that it is. And I believe within that, we're not fully accepting the nature that lives inside for what it genuinely is. And we're still looking for a version of nature that resonates with us. And I believe that that's what nature learns. Nature learns you to be okay with all the seasons that come, to be okay with the rain, to be okay with the sun that comes out, to be okay with not having energy, to be okay with having moments of energy. And all these different elements, let's say, for me create a real, genuine, profound connection to it. and therefore to myself, because I understand that what I see out there lets me experience what is within, and can I be okay with that version of nature that shows up? And if you can, then there's a change happens, a shift happens, because there's, for instance, a show, it's called Alone. People normally don't step out because they're not able to catch fish anymore, or they don't, or they lack the skills or knowledge. They step out because mentally they don't want to be there anymore.
Yeah.
And there we go. So I believe going back to nature actually gives you a beautiful invitation to really profoundly be okay with everything that comes from within. And can you sit with that? Can you allow it to be as it comes and it passes again?
Love that, man.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, that's a nice bridge to go. Like, I mean, what you're doing with the Gathering of Men, which we can maybe summarize as Amsterdam-based lifestyle community, but also a place where, you know, men can just learn to be more authentic, to get to know themselves better, to be okay with their nature and their seasons,
Yeah.
and to figure out more like who they actually are.
Yeah.
I've obviously seen and felt myself very much the effect that this can have on a person, and I'm still learning. Obviously, we're all still learning, but like to see what this is done, and like, you know, to have heard so many men like coming in like, oh, I wasn't sure I was going to come. This is the first time. We're just here for an evening, 2.5, 3 hours, sitting in a circle, sharing, but doing some playful exercises, and then at the end being like, oh, there's actually an opening, there's something new I discovered, or there's maybe something that I pushed away for 30, 40, 50 years that all of a sudden is allowed to be here. What was for you the reason to get into this? Or like, and yeah, why did you feel this was necessary to bring?
Yeah. So I think I recently, I think only recently it kind of clicked. And I think at the beginning, I thought we would go to such a place for healing. That's what I thought. I thought like, yeah, we come in here to heal traumas and to go deep and also to express joy and heal through that. And yes, I still agree, but I think the goal is not healing. The goal is belonging. And I think this is what matters, because if you belong, there will be a place for you to heal. If you belong, there's a place for you to play. If you belong, there's a place for you to fully be safe and to also enjoy the other elements of life that we consider are not necessarily linked to healing, let's say. But if it would only be healing, it would be one particular part and we would come in and go back out. But why is it you're still around? Why is it I'm still around, you know? Yeah. It's because it's a sense, look at your friend group, look at mine.
Yeah.
I mean, I think 80, 90% comes out of this group.
Yeah.
It's mad. Yeah. So is it because of healing, or is it because a sense of belonging?
Yeah.
In the sense of belonging, because you're meeting people who you resonate with and bring the depth that you need in order to evolve yourself. And I believe that's what the place as the Gathering and other men's initiatives do. They create a place where there is a place for you to belong somewhere, where you can match the frequency of the depth that you're actually seeking within yourself and in your life, and the richness of it. And everything gets amplified the more energy is put into it. So the more men show up, the more it's amplified. Yeah. And I also believe that, which is part of my story as well, is I'm good at looking at stuff and admitting stuff to myself. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it. And I think many of us, you know, we all know like, oh, yeah, this shadow, you know, of what, this part of me. Phew.
Yeah.
But then there's the next layer. Yeah. Are you willing? Are you able to put it out there to say like, look at my shit. Yeah. This is the shit I'm carrying within. And to put it out there, I think that's sometimes when we surpass ourselves, when we really heal, because suddenly the contraction, the fear maybe of judgment, of any ways or shame is being taken away, or you're being granted an opportunity to take it away when you place it in the middle and when it's being witnessed by others. And if that response is safe, the shame goes off. The fear can go. Even the fear of expressing joy. So it's not necessarily the heavy, the shadowy part that we think like it's all dark, but all these elements. But therefore, you cannot never take away shame if it's not being witnessed by others. It's needed to put it out there and for it to be safe. So for me, this was really a journey that I thought like, hey, I need men. I need men around me, man, that are willing to look at their shit, are willing to step into their full power, to be real, to come clean, and also men who are willing to commit to this journey and to do it together. Yeah, and if I look at it now, I think at least 90% of my people I'm surrounded with completely changed, fully. And if I look at what came out of the gathering, the connections, the friendships, and people knowing each other, I sometimes forget that and I look like, oh shit, how do you know each other? And like, oh shit, yeah, man. You were at the gathering and you too. And oh shit, and this one too. And then the other day I called, I was calling the community like, hey, what's up? And I said, man, I went onto a walk with this guy. I said, this guy, really, you're still in contact with him? And I'm like, we succeeded.
Yeah, it definitely brings new bonding friendships and community.
Yeah.
It's not just a one-time place where you go to like just try something out for sure. Yeah. I think it's also because you are vulnerable together, because you are like, you're willing to go deep and you're open and to show your shadows and your fears and the shame, and you go through that together. And it's also like one person doing it gives permission in a sense for the others to follow, to do the same.
Yeah.
And it connects on a way deeper level.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, you understand each other, you feel safe, there's a bond being created.
Yeah.
In those moments.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I wouldn't say that the contacts you had before where you would maybe only drink a beer, they don't matter anymore, but they fulfill you on less levels. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, I want more of this. I want to, like, this gives me more. For me, like those connections, they really give me more, like I can tap into more of life, and more of myself.
Yeah.
And there's a very beautiful thing about like being really okay. And like, I wouldn't say it's an addiction, but it's like, it's a way of living where you're like, okay, I want to go deeper, and I want to like, again and again, I choose to step up. I choose to take responsibility. I choose to bring in the thing that's scary. Just the other, like, I think 1-2 weeks ago, we had with our group a session, and we just invited everyone. Was, hey, is there one thing that, if you would really know me, what would you share? If you would really see all the insides of me, is there something that you would know that not many people know? Yeah. And then everyone brought in something that was like, maybe when it first pops up, you're like, oh. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with that part, acknowledging that part of myself, but in doing so, it's seen and it gets transformed. It gets a bit lighter. Yeah, man, it's so good.
Nice said. And what I feel as a reflection upon what you said, I think it's a certain sense of depth that we as we evolve and maybe our self-love grows, that we also demand from our environment and that we want to manifest in a life, a certain depth and richness. And I believe through that element, we start to create this also around us. And what I've started to notice is that the people I decided to invite into my life were only able to be there because of the depth I seek within myself. And therefore, I believe it's important that we start continuously creating all these beautiful connection, these depths within us that actually allow us also to fully connect to another. Because what I've come to realize is sometimes when I don't trust the person, what's actually there, and for me, trust is because sometimes a person carries different faces.
Mm.
And this is when I don't know who I'm dealing with. But the moment for example, you 2 weeks ago comes in clean and says like, hey, this is what I don't know. Or this is what I experienced, like, okay, cool. Now I know who I'm dealing with,
Yeah.
And I think that's sometimes what we need. And there comes the invitation that we also allow ourselves to be. But yeah, to know who you're dealing with is such a beautiful element if you know who's behind it. And if you know that, you can still drink a beer, right? You can still drink a beer and have fun. But also because you know the depth of that person in front of you. If obviously the connection is there and you want to explore it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you, to make it a bit more practical for people that haven't experienced it yet and maybe want to go? And yes, of course, you can come to a gathering. If you're in the Netherlands, you can go to, there's men's initiatives everywhere. Yeah. But how would you say, like, okay, if someone wants to find more depth within themselves, wants to explore more of that, but there's maybe not a sense of how do I do that? What's a possible first step? What would you suggest?
Yeah. I think this is an interesting one, because most likely it's already there. And what I mean by that is I believe the more we get in touch with life and the more we get in touch with ourselves, the subtler we start to feel. Which means the subtler we start to feel, the more we're automatically, organically being aware of everything that's actually happening around us. And I believe the more we start paying attention to that, the more we start to understand, like, oh shit, there's a fucking world out there, which you suddenly become conscious of yourself, of your interaction with that environment that starts taking place. So I believe the first thing that we need to do is simply tune in with what's actually happening within our body, which means I believe that closing our eyes, or simply just already paying attention to our natural responses with eyes closed or open. But if you start to realize, like, okay, I noticed that this glass of Misi, when he put it on the table, is already doing something to me, with noticing that my neck is quite a bit tense, then all these elements, these are for me signs that I know I'm feeling subtler, that I'm becoming softer, that I'm able to tune in into more of myself and therefore the environment. So I would say, before taking a step, check in with yourself if this is something that you recognize. If you feel a certain subtleness, sensitivity to life, maybe from what you experience from others, maybe what you experience within yourself. Maybe physically, maybe in your consciousness, that maybe in thoughts that you start to dissect stories and stuff starts to happen. Then I think what could help at that moment is, first of all, to acknowledge that this is what lives inside. See if there's space for in your environment, perhaps to look for like-minded, which I think comes back to the sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Is it there? Yes or no? Ask people like, hey, I notice I'm starting to feel more subtle, or sometimes pick up on other people's energies. How's that for you? And one person, what the fuck are you talking about? And he said, okay, next. So not dispose the person, but see if you know people around you who are maybe in tune with that. So for me,
that's a really good point, because I also feel like we tend to, maybe when we go into, let's say, a little bit of a different direction in life, we tend to think that the people that we've been connected to for a long time maybe don't fit that new direction. But actually, I think all of us have these parts within ourselves, right? And it's maybe not, it's everyone's to their own timing, and it's maybe into their own interest. But I've definitely noticed, as I'm opening up more about, let's say, my spiritual connection and like the subtlety and how I feel about like life, and how I feel about, the more like sense of bodily sensations and stuff like this. Actually, people that I would never expect, I wouldn't have expected, they've noticed the same things. They recognize the same things.
Yeah, I would say the only thing we can do is be ourselves as much as we can. And I believe through that process, you will see, through expression, sometimes when you are with people, you will start to see also where you are either being seen or feeling, or being safe. And I think these are two important elements for you in a sense of maybe evolution, but also to have a sense of belonging, of not being alone and isolated. So sometimes it's not the person that you would normally hang out with. That doesn't mean you have to get rid of the people, but is there a place for you to be seen and to feel safe in everything that you are? Maybe it's still them, even if they don't resonate. And if that happens and that allowance happen, you just be yourself. And maybe you're the medicine to them tomorrow. Maybe it's in a year. Maybe it's next lifetime. It doesn't matter, as long as you honor what lives inside of you and seek a place where you feel a sense of connection, where you feel a sense of belonging.
What comes up now, one of the first things that I experienced once of course, the first couple of gatherings I joined like some years ago, we were really just in a circle, and it was more like reflecting, talking. But at some point, we evolved into doing more like exercises. And one of the first ones of those that really struck with me was with this exercise where, okay, you're just like walking around a little bit, let's say there's maybe 10, 15 people. And there's a question, for example, who here do you admire the most? And you put your arm on that person's shoulder. And then you start like to just like explore with everyone. Like, okay, why did you put your arm on that shoulder? What's it like to have maybe 5 hands on your shoulders? What's it like to have no hands on your shoulder if you're one of those people? But then you go into like questions that are a bit more like maybe provocative in a sense, or where there's could be more resistance to certain things. So, for example, which person do you feel the most resistance? And then to explore that, to feel like, okay, normally you would like probably stay away a little bit, but actually from from experiencing this kind of exercise a couple of times, I've learned that the person where you feel the most resistance is possibly the person that can teach you the most. And that's so beautiful to also see that when I've really changed from being judgmental about other people in the sense that like I felt like, oh, that person's not for me, to go into like, hey, why is there resistance there? That's just a reflection, right? Even if it hasn't been any interaction, like why is that reflection bringing up resistance for me? What is that teaching me about myself? And then to explore that with that person can be a really great experience to open up the resistance and also to deepen that connection.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. That's just something I really. How have you, for you to bring these different type of exercises? Like, 2 years ago, you for the first time created this initiation, facilitators initiation for men that want to facilitate and host these kind of gatherings. One of the things you really put a lot of emphasis on was authenticity. So, hey, this is not a course where you just learn like, hey, there's 20 practices and you just copy paste, but it's about who are you? What are your values in life? What is your experience? And how can you bring that? So what do you feel like for you? What are those values and what do you want to bring?
For me personally?
Yes.
Eesh. For me, what I feel lost is, in a way, it's just humanness. And it touches me is because I also notice within myself that sometimes I'm still trying to live up to an identity of myself that seems in a way that I put out there as the perfect image of Oscar, who's able to always be confident because he's Spanish, he can dance salsa and he speaks the language fluently, and he's the best lover, and he's a good friend, and what I notice is that I'm sometimes so, in a way, confronted with parts of me that I consider, which I would first consider imperfect. I would not call them human. That for me is something that I'm allowing myself to be human again, brother. Really. That I'm really stepping away from this perfect connotation of who I think I should be and how I should come across, and therefore allowing myself to be human, that I haven't figured life out. I'm doing my best. I'm moving with good intention. And therefore, one of the values that I really carry now goes together with those, as in humanness, as in, for me, it comes through authenticity and integrity, like living truth and authenticity. What is that truth?
Yeah.
And those are the two elements that I try to carry deeply within me. And obviously, there's play. For me, joy is an important element. For me, a sense of adventure is important. I believe in justice also. Um, Nature, courage is a very important one for me. And with that connection, and as you've mentioned, referring to the facilitates initiation, which for me is a way of learning how to facilitate yourself and life, it comes down to the same principles. And I'm also tweaking the course. And for me, what's all about is actually about realness. Like Tupac said, we don't need more role models, we need more real models. Because role models sometimes we put on a pedestal, but real models are the ones that sit among us that we can get inspired by, because we can connect, we can recognize that person. And that's my goal, to be human, to be there. I'm teaching the men now particularly also to do the same, but more importantly, to embody what they stand for. And to give you an example of how simple this is, sometimes we follow breathwork courses. We do somatic or whatever. All these beautiful practices and tools and things, and then I see them in the supermarket, and a lady drops the bag, and they simply just pass, and they go to the counter, and they forget about the woman. And then I'm like, you're missing the exact point of why we're actually doing this work. So because you know how to do a mindful practices doesn't make you mindful. Can you fully embody this everything that you're saying that you believe in? Can I see it in everything that you do in daily life? The way you take care of your plants, the way you put a tea, the way you clean your house, the way you move outside, you take care of strangers. It's all there. Even in the last facilitate course, they wrote down on the board, very beautiful, being like Trump, in big, like when he said "Make America Great Again," they put collective care. And this is no judgment, by the way, what I'm sharing, but it's simply to be mindful. Collective care. And I said, interesting. You all wrote down collective care as a collective, but when the door opened, there was one brother who came in who didn't greet everyone. There was another brother who made, and nobody took care of him. Nobody was really like, hey, brother, let me go to you to give you a hug.
Yeah.
Or simple things as putting tea, preparing tea for each other. Where's the collective care? If you choose versions of collective care, you're not fully embodying the full spectrum of it. Is collective care running through your veins? Is it in every cell of your body? Are you generally not showing, but living that what you generally say that you will be? And I believe the more we start aligning with those values, I think that's the people who generally inspire as real models, because they walk their talk. It's there, it's fully present. And that's why the other day, after that session, when I felt a bit insecure about the session, how I did it during the facilitates course, because there's a part of me that still is seeking validation, external recognition from a group people to say like, hey, good job, or to say like, hey, fucked up. They all get to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, what's mine? How? There's always this sense of I want to claim things, I want to feel something, whether it's good or bad. And I was finished, and I talked about collective care before that, and we were done with the session, and this brother came to me, and everyone left. And he looked at me and said, Os, I saw the way, even though you were still facilitating, I saw the way you took care of people by making sure everyone had their tea in the space. And it really touched me, because I genuinely believe that these are the moments where we make the difference. In the tiny gestures that we can have in everything that's life, and not necessarily the big bang that happens when everybody sees it, but are you doing it also when no one's looking?
Yeah.
And I believe that that's where the value is, and that's what we're forgetting. Everything is so externally oriented, but is it? Can you do it for the sake of genuinely feeling what you believe in, and fully living through that? And yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, man. 100%.
yeah,
And that's what the work is. That's where it gets challenging, tricky, but also worthwhile,
yeah,
I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's okay, I mean, the perfection that I'm not looking to have in myself anymore, I'm also not looking into others. Because, well, that makes, obviously that's like that, because if I don't need it for myself, then I can't expect it from others as well.
Yeah.
But I believe as long as we're honest and open about this, like, hey, I noticed that I wasn't fully living in the collective care vibes, or that I forgot to do it here. I'm sorry, or I could have done it differently. Brother, I shake your hand, man. I'm like, hey, good shit. I like good shit, because you're claiming that what is yours, where you feel like you're allowing humanness to enter the system again. So for me, all those moments of shit coming up, as you know, I call them good shit, because I'm like, you're owning that what you thought was never yours, but suddenly it's there and it comes up, and you own it, and then you decide what to do with it. I salute you. I really salute you. The more you come clean about everything that makes you, the more I can fully connect to you, and the more you can allow me to be imperfect, or better said, human as well.
Yeah. And just before we started recording, we also talked a bit about, one of these aspects of humanness is also not seriousness, right? Like
Yeah.
taking it light and playful. And I think in that sense, we can learn a lot from nature, where it's like everything is just being and it's just in the moment. And it's just like, in a sense, maybe just acting and reacting, but it's not like no one, I don't think many animals are thinking ahead, like, for days or whatever, like we are, like, this whole sense of playfulness. I loved what you talked about a little bit when we just were sitting down before, like those people that you really admire, whether they are gurus or whatever you want to call them, the ones we really admire are the ones that have this lightness and this playfulness.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that, like what that sense is for you, and maybe give some examples as well, like how do these people touch you differently?
Yeah, I notice I'm really starting to dig now. Like, oh, what is it we're talking about? I want to give a good answer. Um, but in that sense, me bringing this in is actually what I'm referring to, and it's, can I be okay with parts of me that are human, and can I also see the lightness within them? I think if we look at the, let's say, the spiritual world, or I don't know, people take it so serious, brother. It's their full practice. Yeah, I saw this video the other day. It was really good. Someone said like, yeah, I woke up at 5 o'clock. Have you seen this one?
Oh, I think so. He's taking the piss out of everything.
Yeah,
It's so good.
yeah,
It is non-stop.
yeah. The
Yeah,
lady
yeah,
and the guy, they were like,
yeah, yeah.
"Oh, I wake up at 5 and go straight in." I went 5 a.m. Really? I do 3 a.m. and then I do 200 push-ups, and I follow up with this and this and this. And then for me, the funniness in it is we think it's a lot about doing and taking things sometimes very serious. But I believe it's in your mundane life, and it's your daily thing where you show what you're really about. And I also think, if I look at the people that inspire me, are the people who understand that life, or the spiritual stuff, is not necessarily a tough journey. That if you look at, for instance, I think in many ways, in religions, also if you look at Buddhism, Christianity, and in the Islam, I don't know that much, but I think maybe it's more or less the same. They always refer to, there's a certain sense of pain, suffering in life, but they also offer hope when you surrender to God, when
Right.
you surrender to, or you go past your sufferings, if you look at Buddhism, or when you surrender to Allah. So there's so many ways where I believe that this lightness is something that we can genuinely embody and look at in life.
Instead of like do you mean like in the sense of these let's say these institutions in a sense,
Yeah.
they give you this picture of, yes, it's possible, but only through something else, or it's only because someone else can give it to you, either it's God or it's this institution or whatever, instead of, hey, you actually have it within you all the time.
I wasn't necessarily
Or,
referring to that, because more the sense of hope that is being created in
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
narrative. And that was what I wanted to say. And I think the sense of joy, nobody ever said in life that it's supposed to be a tough journey, and that every aspect that we talk about, if it's grief, that we should always be mourning for the rest of our life. Like, who told us, brother? I don't know. This is just this fucked up narrative that was created even at funerals, that everyone has to be crying. At a funeral, everyone needs to cry, and you have to be serious for the rest of the day and whatever. Well, luckily, what I'm liking to see is that people sometimes they just boogie, man,
Yeah.
because that's what the person wanted them to bring. Like, hey, don't take stuff too seriously. And this is what I'm really applying to life. Also, when I look at myself drowning in my misery and in my suffering, and all these insecurities and doubts that come up. And if I look at it this, I'm like, wow, look at me go. I was really having a blast and a take on it. And I look at it and I'm like, okay, this was funny. This was a funny. And then I feel a certain, I think that's maybe the thing, because I feel joy in it, lightness, that I get rid of the contraction that is supposed to be on it, and then it can go again. And then suddenly that sensation, that emotion, that story can become neutral again. And when it becomes neutral, I can decide again how I interpret that story. And then I start enjoy, and I'm like, hey, lightness is the frequency that I want to vibe at. And it's for me sometimes breaking that connection, breaking that link, that run of this story is sad and therefore I'm not good enough and whatever, to say like, wow, look where I took myself. I made this beautiful deviation because my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, my uncle, this, and then this happened, and then blah blah, and then I think of my uncle, and he would just be there like, okay, good story, man. Like, fucking hell, good story. You're so right.
Just in a story. You're
Just in a story, and
Yeah.
I'm like, eesh. And the good thing is, when I realize it's just a story, then I know that a story is a narrative. And as I see it, as I now understand that it's a perspective, it's a narrative, then I can also choose to change the narrative. And that's when I bring in lightness, because I believe life is supposed to be fun and life is supposed to be alive. And I think that's where the core message is for me. Spirituality is not stepping out of this human experience, is the contrary. Is the dark shit you see on the street. It's here. It's a mundane life that we live where the spirituality is. And therefore for me is also the aliveness. The aliveness of when people ask me and I feel good, or I simply feel sometimes this is the rawness of my heart. Then I'm like, eesh, today I feel heavy or whatever. And if they would ask me, how are you doing, Oscar? How are you feeling? I said, I feel alive, brother. I feel alive. And I'm like, what does that mean? I said, I just feel alive. I feel everything that is happening. And with that, I'm grateful that I'm able to feel everything that lives inside of me. And with that, I believe if we go back to it, the more I feel alive in every sensation that happens, the more it means for me that the subtler I'm feeling in my body. And I believe that the subtler we feel, the more expansion is in that field, because the frequencies are higher. So therefore, if the frequencies are higher, we immediately go also to a more joyful state, gratitude, you name it. So I believe it's a logical sequence that we end up in. I'm like, hey, life is good, man. I broke my leg yesterday, but look at me now. They're preparing me a nice sandwich at the hospital. I love people are taking care of me, man. This is good shit. Can we laugh about our shit? If you laugh at your shit, brother, and you look in the mirror when you're feeling sad and you go like, wow, look at me feeling sad. Try it.
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm sad. Okay, cool. And you suddenly you feel like I'm so sad. This and this. And you look in the mirror and you say like, I'm so sad. And you're like, what the fuck? I'm like, wow, yeah. And
Yeah.
suddenly the contraction goes off, and you're like, hey, silence.
Yeah. You zoom out a little bit as well, right? Like
Yeah,
you just look at your life
yeah,
from a bit more distance.
yeah.
Yeah. What has been for you? Hey, so this is obviously a big thing, like looking at things lightly. Are there any other practices where you feel like they've really changed, yeah, the way you experience life?
The way I experience life,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, for sure. It's related to this. And I know people who are listening are going to take it lightly, and everyone does when I say it. But if you get this one, it's going to change your fucking life, really. And it's based on this quotation, and I can explain it later. There's two of them. When you realize that there's nothing that exists that's not part of you, that every judgment you level is self-judgment, that every criticism you give is self-criticism, only then you will realize an unconditional love that will be the light of your world. Every situation, every person is an opportunity to join the party of self-reflection. But you have to show up.
Yeah.
And showing up means becoming aware of what's happening in the interaction that we're having now with the lights, with everything that happens. Are you aware of everything that's happening within you, which what is outside of you? And that's for me the lesson. Now when I tune in with you or with anyone that I encounter or places that I'm at, I see those people, I see those situations as for me a gateway, a chance, an opening into my own self-reflection of who I thought I had to be as a person in my identity and beliefs and values and everything that goes in there. But this can happen unconsciously if I don't pay attention, if I don't really focus on it. But if I bring my awareness to it, I'm starting to learn like, wow, sometimes when I get frustrated at my girlfriend or anything like that, when she's late, um, I can feel frustration growing in me also. And then I notice that I judge her upon that. But I also, when I see that, I know that the judgment that I'm putting on her is one that I put on myself as well. So at that moment I realized like, I feel actually, I tend to get small when I tend to get late or anything because I feel judged in that particular sense towards others. So for me, placing this different perspective on what it means when I'm engaging with others and using those as a reflection to learn something about myself, game changer, brother. Really.
It's probably the biggest one that I've learned as well, because you stop projecting on others.
Yeah.
You stop blaming others for doing certain things, and you start to be thankful for the things that they show you
Yeah.
that you can use to learn about yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, as you said before, sometimes when you refer to um, resistance towards another person, sometimes it's resistance, sometimes it's a sense of allergy that we have. If you go down into the allergy, many times it says something about you. Because if we use the example of time, then the allergy can be on someone's never on time. But what is actually the nugget? What's the gift in it? It's bringing it back to yourself and learning something about yourself that you carry it actually when people are on time. So you value time, you respect someone's time. So also these types of interactions we can really transform and use them as beautiful reflections. And I believe that this is such a beautiful way of dealing if we become human. Well, first of all, if we start using situations and person as opportunity for self-reflection, if we acknowledge what happens within, if we then become human by giving it the expression or the observation that it needs, sometimes in interaction with others, it gives, again, it brings connection, first of all, to yourself. It can bring connection between others. And with that, you're opening another portal, I would say, in yourself to release, to open up, and at the same time inviting other people into themselves as well, to step into their humanness. So win-win with it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
More humanness.
Hey.
I think that's a beautiful way to start putting to an end. Oscar, I know there's a lot of places and things that you are organizing and doing, both with the Gathering of Men, but also other initiatives. Can you please share what those things are, where people can find them? I will also link them in the show notes, but I would love to hear from you the things that you have coming up.
Yeah, so there's the Gathering of Men, which is a community of brotherhood, which really focus on building community. So it's more a lifestyle. I think what we see now in many initiatives or things happening in the world, they seem to be like this one-off. So going back to embodiment, they seem to be like this one-off thing. So we lose momentum. But I believe that true embodiment, true integration comes through consistency. And therefore, consistency is needed. So we're now actually with the Gathering of Men having more like a lifestyle community where you can, for instance, pay a monthly fee, you show up, and we sit in circle together, but we break bread. We have dinners together. We sit in silence doing meditations, and we train together. So we break a sweat, and at the same time, we build businesses. So it's really this sense of community, this sense of belonging that offers place for healing, that offers place for peace, and offers a place for purpose to build dreams, and also place power, as in the physical appearances. We have indeed the courses, as in the facilitated initiation, learning how to facilitate yourself, and then authentically step into life with that beautiful element. Besides the Gathering of Men, there's a never-ending journey, which is all about humanly accessible adventure. That's it. So we bringing adventure, but with a human touch. Imagine doing it with people that you belong to, like-minded people that they can bring in the depth and have the good conversations. And we make adventure accessible. So we have a bushcraft initiative, an immersion that brings you in 5 days to, once again, to learn the knowledge and skills, but also build a connection to nature. And we go in October to Nepal for those who feel like I want to go for an adventure of a lifetime with the right people at the right place. And for any inquiries, anything that is regarding me personally, I'm happy to hear. I'm here.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And one thing that I'm really excited about is Inner Alchemy with the Gathering of Men in Portugal.
Yes.
Which is June, what is it? June 15, 13? Somewhere in
June 12 till 15. Yeah. It's a 4-day retreat, men's immersion or 4-day retreat that really deals with the let's say the 4 elements that we consider important, which is peace, power, purpose, and we added play, as play is an important element as well. So it's 4 days of brotherhood, of fully diving in, but also I think we as men, we think a lot and we guess we can do stuff and we guess we cannot. And I believe that we as men learn through doing, and that's where we build confidence to know like, oh, this is what I cannot do and this is what I can do. Because even dealing with a man who says he can, but you see he cannot, he's difficult to trust. But if you have a man who says like, no, man, this is not for me, I can't do this. You're like, thank you. You're clear. You know what you're capable of and what you're worth. So to dive in a 4 days, going to bed together, to really have a lost confide conversation, to wake up in the morning, with the rising of dawn, and you wake up together, you eat, to really have 4 full days of fully immersing into oneself and as a collective is a very fun, especially healing, and a fun experience. Yeah. Healing is not heavy. Healing is actually a lot of fun if you focus on the right things. So that's what the Inner Alchemy does in Portugal, 12 till 15th of June.
Yeah, perhaps see you there.
Hey, let's go.
Yeah, thanks, brother, so much for being here and sharing your experience. And man, we're going to do a gathering tonight.
Yeah.
Looking forward as well. And see you on the next one.
See you.
Thanks for watching or listening to the Spirit Unfolding podcast. I'm so grateful that you've joined us in this episode, and I hope that you've gained valuable insights and inspiration that you can apply to your own life. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with your family, friends, and on social media. And subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts so we can reach more people and bring on bigger guests. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.